I want to talk about how pull requests are similar to tests in school. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I think it's a hard enough transition to move from school to full-time software engineering. And so I think it's helpful to have something that you feel like you can relate to. And pull requests, in my opinion, are pretty close in the beginning to a test in college. When you're taking a programming test, whether it's a written programming test on paper, or if it's some kind of digital one, or if it's a project, you're coding a project or something, all of that, in school you have the luxury of having grades and having clear requirements for projects, and you get feedback, and you have a GPA. All these things help you to track your own personal metrics, right? If you get a C on a test, you'll see your GPA probably go down. If you get an A, you'll see it go up. And then when you get to the final, you go and calculate, okay, what's the minimum grade that I need to get in order to pass this class? We all do that. We all did that. And that's only rational because we have this very clear metric for how we're doing. The real world is not like that. Software engineering in the real world is certainly not like that. There's no clear metric. There's no clear guideline or test or GPA that you have to see how in the world you're doing. And that can be very challenging and difficult to transition to. And I've often felt like when I was in school, I used my tests as my benchmark for how I was doing. And I didn't really use communication with others in my class as a metric for how I was doing, because that didn't affect my GPA at all. But in the real world, I've noticed that I've stopped really using code and pull requests as a metric for how I'm doing, but I use how I'm communicating with my team or other teams and planning as the metric for how I'm doing. So I feel like it switched. I feel like it's done a reverse. And it took a few years, but I think my mentality around my own personal metrics has done a complete just switch from how it was in school. But I'm thinking about, when you do make the transition from school to software engineering, I really think that something that can help you out with this is to treat your pull requests like tests, because I think that they're going to be the closest thing that you have, that you can relate to your tests. Because, when you take a test, you get feedback and you get a score, and you either pass or fail. Pull requests are kind of like submitting a test or a paper. You wrote all this code, you hopefully are getting feedback on it, and by way of comments or suggestions, whatever it is. You may have to go back and correct those and resubmit your code for review, and then it's either going to get accepted or rejected. And that's very similar to tests. And the only thing that's really lacking there is a quote unquote grade. But the grade of your code, I think honestly, is whether or not after it gets accepted, if it produced any bugs or if it broke production. If it doesn't break anything, if there's no bugs and it adds value, then I think that you can treat that as a passing test. You got an A on it. And so I think that looking at pull requests as tests can help you make that transition and help you just, I think, orient yourself into software engineering, into this career from school. And I wish I had looked at it like that myself, because I feel like I struggled to make the transition from school to full-time software engineering. I felt like I struggled to make the transition because I just tried to look at it. I was looking for metrics like I had in school. I was looking for a GPA or a grade or feedback all the time, or all those things. But in school, you have, again, the luxury of being able to move on from a problem, right? When you take a test, that's it. When you turn a homework assignment, you're done. The only thing that carries over is the knowledge, right? Is the stuff that you need to know that probably compounds on itself to till the final exam, right? It's all leads up to that final. But once you're done with the problem, you're done. And the only thing that, you don't have to linger on it or ruminate on it. But in the real software engineering world, your problems never really go away because you're always working with the same code. So you can never, in a sense, really be done. And that can be quite challenging. And that can be very, honestly, for me, it was very mentally exhausting because I never felt like I could set something aside, put something down, right? In school, I was done with the paper, I turn it in, never have to look at it again. Real software engineering is not like that at all. If you write code, you may see it 10 years later. You may see it 15 years later. It's going to pop up at some point you never thought it was going to. And, we've all been asked a question about code that we wrote years ago. And, you have no idea. You don't remember writing that at all. And you look at it and you're like, I don't know why it was written this way. I don't know why I wrote it this way. I don't know what I was doing. We've all had that code, and that's just the reality. It's like it's always kind of following you around. And that can be kind of annoying, to be completely honest. That can be very annoying. And so that in itself is a rather hard transition from school to software engineering. But it's the truth, right? And I feel like enough of those challenges can make the experience less than ideal, can make it stressful, and can make it, not as exciting as maybe you thought this job was going to be. But I think if you try to find the commonalities between software engineering and school, and if you try to find how you can relate it in your mind, I feel like you'll be a little bit more at peace because you'll feel like it relates to what you're used to. And because I feel like we all try to find things that we can relate to. And so I think that treating pull requests as tests, I think, can be helpful in that. I think, can maybe just offer a strategy as to how you can go about this transition a little bit easier. Another thing that I would suggest, and it's something that I wish I had done earlier, is just continue to study, and continue to study as if you were going to have a test on the material. And I think that, when you are done with your textbooks from school or your, assignments or, whatever other books, I would start to seriously try to craft a new study plan when you get into full-time. And I would try to seriously consider making your own personal curriculum and getting like a list of books that you want to read, or textbooks, and just, set aside, okay, I want to read these 4 this year, and I'm going to try to read them in order. But just, make it like a schedule, make it like a class schedule, and go from there. Because I think that if you continue the habit of studying paired with your full-time job, I think you're going to see a level of advancement that you wouldn't see had you just stopped studying after school. And because I think that, to be completely honest with you, I think that once you graduate, there's a real temptation there to stop studying and to stop reading. But I think that you need to read more after graduating, not because you have to, right? If you get a job, you've made it in a sense in your mind, right? You've achieved what you set out to do in college. You've gotten the job, and that's why you studied and put all that time. But once you get the job, you can't stop there, right? You can't get complacent in that spot, because once you start to get complacent, it's just because of how fast the technology is changing, you'll begin to back yourself into a corner, and then you kind of limit your opportunities for advancement and growth in this career. Now, if this job wasn't changing as much, if the technology didn't change so fast, maybe that wouldn't be true. But because it does change a lot, and technology from 10 years ago looks way different from technology now, and because that's the case, it requires constant studying and requires constant reading and practicing and prototyping, and that's just part of this job. And if you stop studying and then try to, like what I did, and it's going to be a little bit more of an abrupt transition. I know it was for me. I know when I had graduated, I didn't study or read after, just because I felt like I had, I felt like I had set out or made it, and I felt like I had set out to do, I did what I set out to do, right? I got a job. And, I started to get a little comfortable. I started to get comfortable where I was, and I didn't put in a little bit extra time to study. And I felt like it kind of hindered my advancement early on. And so I wish I had done that earlier and read and studied. But so hopefully those things get you thinking about what that transition is going to look like for you. But overall, it's an exciting time. I think I think you're going to see a lot of enjoyment in whichever path you choose. There's a lot of different types of programming, but I think that if you pick the right one that you're interested in, I think it can be a good experience. So that's all I got today. I'll see you in the next one.